I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. I'm Paul, and up until a few months ago, I thought my marriage to Sarah was the real deal. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4. She was my high school sweetheart, and we were that classic couple everyone thought would make it. If I'm honest, the first hints were subtle, things anyone could have missed. A shift in her tone, maybe, or the way she'd suddenly shut down her phone whenever I walked into the room. Little stuff, you know? But she started acting distant. Conversations we'd have late into the night stopped happening. And even when I'd ask her how her day was, she'd just throw out a quick, fine, then drift off to God knows where. Then came the canceled plans, her work meetings, going way later than normal. I remember one night in particular, I'd set up this whole movie night for us, just wanting to have some normal time together. She texted me half an hour before she was supposed to be home, saying she'd be working late again. I'd heard that line enough to know something was off, but I told myself I was just overthinking. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. And when I'd bring it up, she'd laugh it off, say I was being paranoid. She'd even tease me for not trusting her. But I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something was slipping between us. Even if I didn't know what it was yet, after weeks of feeling that unsettling distance between us, I started noticing even more red flags. She became super protective of her phone, which was weird because we'd always been open about that sort of thing. She'd turn it face down at dinner, carry it with her everywhere, even into the bathroom, stuff she'd never done before. I tried not to think too much about it, convincing myself it was just work stress or maybe some personal stuff she didn't want to burden me with. One night, I got home earlier than usual from work. Sarah wasn't expecting me, and I could hear her on the phone in the other room, her voice hushed and different, almost flirtatious. I thought maybe it was one of her girlfriends, but something in my gut told me to listen closer. I inched toward the doorway, hearing her laugh in this playful way that felt foreign to me. Then I heard her say, "You're so bad, Derek," followed by a laugh I hadn't heard in months. I froze. Derek? I didn't know any Derek in her life. At least not anyone she'd be talking to like that. Before I could react, she ended the call, and I backed up, pretending like I hadn't heard anything. But I couldn't shake it. That night, when she was asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up her phone. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't ignore what was in front of me anymore. I opened her text, and there it was. Derek, a whole string of messages between them, hidden in some folder I didn't even know existed on her phone. They were explicit, way more than I'd been prepared for. Messages about secret meetups, plans to see each other, and her telling him things I thought she'd only say to me. I put the phone down, staring at the ceiling, feeling my entire world crumble in silence beside her, while she slept like nothing was wrong the next morning. I woke up feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Sarah acted like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just shattered my trust. But I couldn't sit through another day pretending. So I waited until after breakfast, until we were alone in the kitchen, and I just came out with it. "Who's Derek?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my insides were shaking. She froze, eyes darting to her coffee, then back to me, her expression shifting in that split second. She forced a laugh and tried to brush it off. "Oh, just someone from work," she said, waving it away like I'd asked about a random coworker. "Why?" I didn't let her off the hook. "Don't lie to me, Sarah." I saw the text. The words hung in the air, and for a second, I thought she'd break down, admit it. But instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and doubled down. "Oh, so now you're snooping through my phone?" She had this angry, defensive tone, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. "Paul, I can't believe you'd invade my privacy like that. I need some space, okay? You're smothering me." I couldn't believe it. Here I was, dealing with the worst betrayal of my life, and she was flipping it around, trying to make me feel guilty. I asked her point blank if she was cheating, and she laughed, calling me paranoid and jealous. But I saw the look in her eyes, that flicker of guilt she couldn't completely hide. Finally, she admitted that Derek was just a friend, insisting that they'd only had a few innocent conversations and nothing physical had happened. But she couldn't look me in the eye when she said it. I wanted to believe her, but those messages, they weren't innocent. I told her I needed the truth, all of it. But she just brushed me off, calling me obsessed and insecure. The confrontation ended with her storming out, slamming the door, leaving me standing there with nothing but unanswered questions and a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. I spent that day in a fog, moving through the motions of life while my mind spun in a million directions. Anger and confusion coursed through me, battling with the remnants of love I still felt for Sarah. I replayed our conversation over and over, each time hoping for a different outcome, wishing I could just wake up and find it was all a bad dream. But reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman I built my life with was hiding something huge. The hours crawled by. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but I found myself texting my best friend, Matt. I spilled everything, hoping for some clarity, some solid ground beneath my feet. He offered support, but also insisted I needed to confront her again, this time without letting her dodge the hard questions. When Sarah finally came home, I could feel the tension in the air. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw things, but instead, I sat silently at the dining table, my heart racing. She walked in like she hadn't just wrecked our entire life together. I was furious, hurt, and confused, but mostly, I felt betrayed. "Did you sleep with him?" I asked, my voice trembling. The question hung heavy between us, and for a moment, I thought she might finally come clean. She hesitated, eyes darting around the room. "No, I told you. It's nothing like that. I would never do that to you, Paul." Her voice was sharp, defensive, but I could see through the cracks. I felt like I was losing my mind, watching her spin her lies and justifications like a master. "Sarah," the text there explicit, "you were planning to meet him. How can you look me in the eye and say you're not cheating?" My voice cracked, the weight of my words crashing over me. She opened her mouth to argue, but then faltered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Okay, fine. Maybe I got too close, but it didn't mean anything. I just wanted to feel something different. You've been so distant, and I was lonely." Her admission struck me like a slap. Loneliness? I felt it too. I thought we were both in this together, but clearly I had no idea how she'd been feeling. It hurt to see her like this, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. My heart was a tangled mess of sadness, anger, and confusion, and I felt like I was drowning in it. As she broke down, I realized this wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the cracks that had formed in our relationship, about the love that had become strained and frayed. I was left with a whirlwind of emotions. The initial shock morphed into a raw sadness that seeped into my bones. The realization that we had both been lonely in our marriage was the worst part that night. We spent hours in an uncomfortable silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning while my mind replayed the same cycle of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically, and I knew I had to make a decision. When the sun finally rose, painting the room in a soft light, I found Sarah sitting on the edge of our bed, staring blankly at her hands. I felt a mix of empathy and bitterness as I looked at her. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes, but her expression was unreadable. "I know I messed up, Paul. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just give me a chance," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. "You don't understand how deeply this hurts. I can't just pretend it didn't happen, Sarah. I've lost trust in you." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "You may think you can just turn it off and make it all okay again, but it's not that simple. I don't know if I can keep doing this. As I spoke, I felt a shift inside me. Yes, I loved her, and yes, I wanted to believe her words, but I also knew I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Trust, once shattered, takes time, if not forever, to rebuild. After what felt like an eternity, I finally said it out loud. I think I need some space. I need to figure out if this is something I can forgive or if it's time to move on. Her face fell, and for the first time, I could see the fear in her eyes. But I don't want to lose you. I'll change, I swear. I don't think it's that easy, I replied, feeling my heart twist in pain. You've got to understand that I need time to process all of this. You need to really think about what you want to. We talked for a while longer, and as hard as it was, I could see the cracks forming on her side as well. She realized that this was not just a momentary fight, but a turning point in our lives. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew I needed to step away, to breathe, and to figure out how to heal. As I packed a small bag to stay at Matt's for a bit, I felt like I was watching my old life slip away. I closed the door behind me, glancing back at the home we'd built together. It felt surreal. I was torn between anger and the remnants of love, but deep down, I knew this was the right choice for me at that moment. Staying at Matt's was a strange mix of relief and heartache. I had my own space, away from Sarah's presence, and I needed that distance to think clearly. I spent the first few days in a haze, wrestling with my emotions, replaying every moment we had shared. I missed the good times, our late-night talks, our silly inside jokes, the comfort of her presence. But they felt overshadowed by the weight of her betrayal. Matt was a good friend through it all, offering support without judgment. We talked late into the night about relationships, trust, and what it meant to really love someone. He reminded me that it was okay to feel angry, to grieve what I had lost, and to not rush into any decisions. The days turned into weeks, and I took that time to reflect on what I wanted for my future. I realized that I was not just angry at Sarah for her betrayal. I was also angry at myself for ignoring the signs. I had let my own needs go unmet, convincing myself everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. It was a wake-up call, a painful but necessary lesson. Through this process, I learned a few things. Communication is key. I understood now how vital open and honest communication was in any relationship. We had both become so wrapped up in our lives that we'd lost touch with each other. I vowed that, if I ever found myself in a relationship again, I would prioritize sharing my feelings and checking in with my partner regularly. Trust takes time to rebuild. If Sarah and I were to ever work things out, I knew it would take a long time to rebuild that trust. It's not something that could be fixed with promises or tears. It requires genuine effort and a commitment to change from both sides. Self-care matters. I learned the importance of taking care of myself, both emotionally and physically. I started going for long runs, picking up a few hobbies I had put aside, and reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in a while. It felt good to focus on me, to rediscover who I was outside of the marriage. Honesty is non-negotiable. I realized that I could never compromise on honesty in a relationship again. I wanted someone who would be upfront with me, who would face conflicts head-on rather than hiding behind lies. It became clear that if I went back to Sarah, that honesty had to be at the core of our renewed commitment. As time passed, I found myself weighing the possibility of returning to Sarah against the newfound clarity I was gaining about what I truly wanted. I still loved her, but love alone wasn't enough. I had to decide if I could see a path forward, one where trust and honesty could be rebuilt, or if it was time to let go and start fresh. The lessons were hard, but they were invaluable. I knew that whatever decision I made next, I would be stronger for it. After several weeks of solitude and introspection, I decided it was time to meet with Sarah again. I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I prepared for this conversation. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I needed closure one way or another. When I walked into the cafe where we had agreed to meet, my heart raced. Sarah was already there, fidgeting with her coffee cup, looking both nervous and hopeful. She looked different somehow. Softer, maybe, It struck me how quickly things had changed, how two people who once seemed so solid could end up here, on shaky ground. "Hey," I said, taking a seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," I admitted, feeling the weight of those words. But this wasn't just about nostalgia. I took a deep breath and dove in. "I've had a lot of time to think about us and what happened." Sarah looked at me with wide eyes, her hands clasped tightly around her cup. "And I can't pretend that what you did didn't hurt me deeply," I said, meeting her gaze. "Trust isn't just a word. It's the foundation of everything, and you shattered that." Tears pooled in her eyes as she nodded, understanding. "I know. I messed up, and I'm so sorry, Paul. I've spent every day thinking about how I let you down." "I want to believe you," I replied, my heart aching. "But I can't ignore that you crossed a line. I need to know if you really understand the gravity of what you did." "I do. I've been talking to a therapist," she said, her voice steadying. "I'm working on myself, on understanding why I made those choices. I didn't want to hurt you. I just felt lost." "Lost," I echoed, feeling a familiar sting. "We both were, Sarah. But you chose to step outside our marriage instead of talking to me. I can't promise that I'll ever trust you the same way again, and that's what I need to figure out." She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "I don't want to lose you. I want to rebuild this, to work on being better for you, for us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Her sincerity hit me hard. I could see the pain in her eyes, the remorse that had built up during our time apart. But as much as I wanted to leap back into the comfort of our relationship, I had to be smart about it. I had to protect myself, too. "I need time, Sarah," I finally said, feeling a mix of resolve and sadness. "Time to figure out if I can see a future with you again, if we can truly rebuild. I want to take things slow, to start from the ground up, if that's even possible." "Of course," she replied, her voice breaking. "I'll give you whatever space you need. I just want the chance to prove I can change." As we finished our coffee, we talked about the possibility of starting fresh, with open communication and honesty at the forefront. I could feel the weight of the conversation lifting just a little, though uncertainty still loomed in the air. I walked away from that meeting knowing that the journey ahead would be long and difficult, but at least we had a glimmer of hope. The choice was mine to make, and it felt powerful, even amidst the chaos. I knew I had to proceed with caution, but I also felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Hope. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically fix themselves, but they did start to feel more manageable. Sarah and I began communicating more openly, discussing our feelings, and exploring the reasons why we had drifted apart. It wasn't easy. Some days were harder than others, but we were committed to the process. We decided to go to couples therapy together, which was intimidating at first. Sitting in a room with a stranger, talking about our most intimate issues, felt raw and uncomfortable. But with every session, I began to see the cracks in our relationship not just as signs of failure, but as opportunities for growth. We started learning how to listen to each other, really listen, and understanding the importance of vulnerability. As we worked through our issues, I learned more about Sarah than I ever had before. I realized she was struggling with her own insecurities, feelings of inadequacy, and the pressures of life that she had kept bottled up. For so long, I had thought of her betrayal as a singular act of infidelity, but it was rooted in a complex web of emotions that we both needed to address. I also began to take more responsibility for my part in our struggles. I had neglected my own needs, allowing myself to drift into complacency. I started setting boundaries, expressing my feelings, and making sure I prioritized my own well-being. It felt empowering, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that I had lost. As we continued our journey, there were moments of doubt, but also moments of joy. I could see the flickers of the love we once shared sparking back to life. We'd have date nights, rediscovering each other in small, beautiful ways. I found myself laughing again, enjoying her company, and feeling hopeful for the future. After several months, I realized something profound. The process of healing takes time, and while I didn't know what the future held, I felt more equipped to navigate it, together or apart. It became clear that our relationship could evolve, whether that meant rekindling our love or eventually deciding to part ways amicably. I'd learned that love isn't always enough to make a relationship work. It requires effort, honesty, and commitment from both partners. I also learned that it's okay to prioritize my own needs and emotions, something I had neglected for far too long. As I reflect on everything we've gone through, I feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, even in pain. While I still carry the scars of betrayal, I've also found a deeper understanding of what it means to love and be loved. Whether Sarah and I end up together in the long run remains uncertain, but I've gained a renewed sense of self-clarity and hope for whatever comes next. If I could offer any advice to someone in a similar situation, it would be this. Don't rush your healing. Take the time to understand yourself, communicate openly, and be honest about your feelings. Relationships are messy, but with effort and a willingness to grow, they can become something even more beautiful than before. And above all, remember that it's okay to put yourself first. Your happiness matters too.